The morning shift at the opulent Delacroix Palace Hotel had just begun when Amara James, the head housemaid, noticed something strange. She had been working at the hotel for 7 years, long enough to know that the Monarch suite was always secured, heavily guarded, and visited only by people whose names were written in gold on the guest list. That morning, the suite's door was slightly ajar. Her instincts told her something was wrong. She paused, clutching the fresh towels in her hands, and peeked in. Inside, King Laurent IV of San Marquez, a tall, elegant man with silver hair and a regal air, sat in a velvet armchair. Across from him was Alexander Vaughan, the American billionaire who practically owned half of the hotel chain. They were deep in conversation about a massive oil deal that could change the economy of 2 nations. But Amara's eyes weren't drawn to them, they were drawn to the man standing just behind King Laurent. He wore a server's uniform, but something about him was off. His shoes weren't regulation hotel issue. His gloved right hand seemed unnaturally stiff, as though holding something inside the palm. Amara felt her heart race. She knew the faces of every real server on staff. This man wasn't one of them. She stepped back into the hallway, looking for the security guard who usually patrolled the floor. Strangely, no one was there. It was as if everyone had disappeared. When she tried to approach the suite again, Margaret, the floor manager, appeared and blocked her way. "Amara, the VIP suites are off limits unless requested. Don't cause a scene," she said sharply. But, go finish the East Wing." The door closed before Amara could get another word out. Her hands trembled as she pushed the laundry cart away. But deep inside, she knew she hadn't imagined what she saw. The server inside was watching King Laurent too closely, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment. By the time lunch service approached, her dread had only grown. She overheard that the king and Alexander Vaughan were scheduled to sign documents in the suite at precisely 1 p.m. The man would still be there. And if she was right, someone might not survive the day. Amara had 2 options: follow orders and stay silent, or find a way to warn them before it was too late. And she had less than 2 hours to decide. Amara wheeled her laundry cart down the corridor of the East Wing, but her mind was nowhere near the crisp linen stacked inside. The image of that false server behind King Laurent played in her mind over and over. She'd been in service long enough to recognize posture. That wasn't a man serving drinks, that was a man waiting for a moment. Every instinct screamed danger, but protocol was ironclad in the Delacroix Palace Hotel. Staff interfering with VIPs without permission wasn't just frowned upon, it was a fireable offense. Amara's paychecks went to her younger sister's tuition and her mother's medication. Losing this job could mean losing the roof over their heads. She tried to tell herself she might be overreacting. Perhaps he was a last-minute hire. Maybe his shoes were just different. But then she remembered. She'd seen him subtly pressing his right hand inside his glove, as if clutching something thin and metallic. Amara's phone buzzed, a message from the staff group chat. All security called to main lobby for emergency protocol review. Floor teams maintain distance from Suite 501 until clearance given. Her stomach dropped. Suite 501, that was the Monarch suite. If all security had been summoned to the lobby, that floor was unprotected except for the guards at the elevator, and the false server was already inside. She abandoned the East Wing and turned down the central hall, pushing the laundry cart like she belonged there. Every second she expected Margaret, the floor manager, to appear and reprimand her again, but luck, or fate, kept the hall clear. When she reached the service stairwell, she parked the cart and slipped inside. The back stairs connected directly to the suite's pantry entrance. Her shoes were silent on the carpeted steps as she climbed to the top floor. At the pantry door, she stopped, pressing her ear against the wood. Voices. And as I said, Alexander, King Laurent's deep, steady tone carried through, this partnership will benefit both our nations. I couldn't agree more, Your Majesty, Vaughan replied in his polished American accent. Then, a third voice, low, unfamiliar, and unnervingly calm. Gentlemen, if you would permit me to refresh your drinks before you sign. Amara's heart thudded so loudly she feared they might hear it. She pushed the door open a crack. The pantry connected directly to the main sitting area, where the king and Vaughan sat at a marble table. The false server was indeed there, a silver tray in one hand, his other hand slipping under the folds of his uniform jacket. From her angle, she could see the glint of something, not a utensil, not a corkscrew, a weapon. She had seconds. Amara stepped in fully, her voice trembling but loud. "Excuse me, sir, but you're needed in the kitchen for the wine inventory." The man's head snapped toward her. His eyes were sharp, assessing, predator's eyes. "Who are you?" Vaughn asked, frowning. "Housekeeping, sir," Amara replied quickly, forcing a polite smile. "We have an urgent delivery, and the chef asked for this gentleman specifically." The false server's jaw tightened. "I don't," but Amara had already moved closer, deliberately bumping her hip against the tray he held. The silverware clattered, and in that tiny distraction, she grabbed his wrist, the one inside the glove, and yanked it upward. A sleek, collapsible blade sprang from his hand. For a split second, everyone froze. Then chaos erupted. Vaughn shoved his chair back, King Laurent rose, and the man twisted violently, throwing Amara off balance. She hit the pantry counter hard, her shoulder screaming in pain, but she lunged again, shouting, "Weapon!" The suite door burst open, two delayed security officers rushing in, guns drawn. They tackled the attacker before he could escape, pinning him to the carpet. The blade skidded across the floor. King Laurent's face was pale, but his voice was steady. "Get him out of here. Now." Vaughn turned to Amara. You, he ran a hand through his hair, still shaking. "If you hadn't come in." The security chief entered, his face thunderous. "We received a false call to the lobby, all our units were pulled downstairs. Someone orchestrated this." His gaze shifted to Amara. "How did you know?" "I didn't know," she admitted, breathing hard. "I just saw something wrong." Margaret, the floor manager, appeared behind them, her mouth opening in horror as she took in the scene. "Amara, you saved my life," Vaughn interrupted sharply. "And the king's." "I don't want to hear a single word against her." Margaret's jaw snapped shut. The attacker was dragged out, still struggling, shouting in a language Amara didn't understand. The suite slowly quieted, though the tension lingered like static in the air. King Laurent approached her, taking her hand gently. "Miss James, Your Majesty." "Miss James," he said solemnly, "you have done something extraordinary today. My family and my people owe you a debt." Her cheeks burned. "I was just doing what anyone would." "No," Vaughn cut in. "Not anyone. Everyone else ignored you." Amara didn't know what to say. Security began combing the suite for any other threats. Margaret busied herself pretending to help, avoiding Amara's gaze. The king and Vaughn stepped aside to speak privately, their voices low. A moment later, Vaughn turned back to her. "You're not going back to housekeeping tonight. You're coming with us, the king and I need to ask you some questions." Privately, she hesitated. "Am I in trouble?" Vaughn's expression softened. "On the contrary, you might be the only person in this building I can trust right now." And that was how Amara James, a maid who'd been told to keep her head down and stay invisible, found herself sitting between a monarch and a billionaire in a secure room deep in the hotel's restricted wing. What she didn't know yet was that this wasn't over. The blade wasn't the only danger hidden in the suite that day. And the man she helped capture wasn't working alone. The secure room deep inside the Delacroix Palace Hotel was a stark contrast to the luxury above. Its walls were reinforced steel, the lighting dim but steady, the air cool enough to raise goosebumps on Amara's skin. She sat in a leather chair between King Laurent IV and Alexander Vaughn, her mind still reeling from what had happened just minutes before. Two armed security officers stood by the door. A third man, older and wearing an earpiece, leaned against the wall, his sharp eyes flicking between the king and the billionaire. "I still can't believe it," Vaughn muttered, pacing. If she hadn't walked in. King Laurent's tone was calmer, though his gaze was intense. "This was no ordinary attempt. My enemies usually have more subtlety." The older man by the wall stepped forward. "Sir, I've reviewed the attacker's ID. It's fake. No fingerprints on file. Whoever sent him knew our security rotations. This was coordinated." Vaughn rubbed his temple. "Coordinated, and timed to perfection. Someone pulled every security detail to the lobby right before the attempt." "Meaning," the king said grimly, "someone inside this hotel was helping them." Amara's stomach twisted. She remembered Margaret blocking her earlier, insisting she leave. Could it be her, or was that just coincidence? The king turned to Amara. "Miss James, I'd like you to tell me everything you saw. Every detail. Nothing is too small." She described the slightly ajar door, the false server's shoes, the way he held his right hand inside the glove. She explained how she'd tried to get help but had been told to leave. When she finished, Vaughn was staring at her with an expression somewhere between admiration and disbelief. You risked your job, and maybe your life, to stop him. She shrugged awkwardly. I didn't think about that at the time. I just couldn't walk away. Before anyone could respond, the door opened and another guard stepped in, whispering urgently to the man with the earpiece. His eyes widened. What is it? King Laurent asked. The guard hesitated, then said, Sir, we found a device in the monarch suite. Under the table. A bomb? Vaughn demanded. Not exactly. A transmitter. Hidden microphone, possibly live. Amara felt cold rush through her. The earpiece man spoke sharply. That means whoever planted it can hear everything. They might already know the attempt failed. King Laurent stood. We cannot stay here. If this was part of a larger plan, there may be a secondary move. The older security officer nodded to the guards. Move them to sublevel 2. Full lockdown. As they were escorted down a freight elevator, Amara's thoughts spiraled. If there was one assassin in a live transmitter, then someone somewhere was still watching. And maybe, just maybe, they weren't done. The elevator jolted to a stop. The guard nearest the panel frowned. We weren't supposed to stop here. The lights flickered, then went out. In the darkness, a metallic clink echoed, a sound Amara instantly recognized from her years pushing carts and moving supplies. It was the sound of a latch opening. Back, one of the guards barked. But it was too late. The elevator doors were forced open from the outside, revealing 2 masked figures in black tactical gear. Gunfire erupted, muffled pops, not loud bursts, but enough to make Amara's ears ring. She dropped to the floor, covering her head as guards returned fire. The confined space turned into chaos, flashes of light, shouts, the heavy thud of bodies hitting the ground. A strong hand grabbed her wrist, not a guard's hand, but Vaughn's. Come on, he hissed. In the confusion, he pulled her toward the open doors. They ran down a dim corridor she didn't recognize. King Laurent was just behind them, flanked by the earpiece man. This way, the security chief barked, leading them into a maintenance tunnel. The air smelled of oil and dust. They moved fast, their footsteps echoing. Amara's heart pounded so hard it hurt. Only when they reached a heavy steel door did they pause. The security chief punched in a code, the lock disengaging with a loud click. Inside was a small control room with old monitors and a wall of keys. Vaughn slammed the door shut. Tell me someone is sealing off the rest of the hotel. They are, the chief replied, breathing heavily. But this wasn't random. They knew your meeting was today. They knew where you'd be moved after the first attempt failed. King Laurent's eyes narrowed, which means they're still in the building. Amara sat down on a crate, trying to steady her breathing. So, there could be more of them. The chief looked at her gravely. Yes, and until we find who inside is helping them, no one is safe. Silence settled in the room, heavy and suffocating. Then one of the monitors flickered to life, not with the hotel's CCTV feed, but with a live video. The camera showed the hotel lobby, and Margaret, the floor manager, standing with 2 men Amara had never seen before. One handed her a phone. She answered it, smiling. Vaughn leaned closer to the screen. That's not a casual chat. She's coordinating. Amara's chest tightened. She'd suspected Margaret, but seeing it confirmed was still a shock. The security chief cursed under his breath. If she's feeding them information, she knows you're not in the suite anymore. They'll come looking. Then we move, King Laurent said decisively. I refuse to sit here like a trapped animal. Sir, with all due respect. No, we move, but quietly. We take service routes they won't expect. The plan was set in seconds. They would exit through the loading dock, blend in with staff leaving after the morning shift, and get to Vaughn's private residence across town. It sounded simple. It wasn't. As they crept through the narrow maintenance corridors, Amara noticed how tense Vaughn was. His jaw was set, his eyes scanning every shadow. The king, however, walked with the same unshakable posture as before, though his hand occasionally brushed the concealed pistol at his side. They were halfway to the dock when Amara heard footsteps behind them, too many, too fast. The security chief cursed. They've found us. Go. Vaughn snapped. The guards turned to hold the pursuers back while Amara, Vaughn, and the king hurried down the last stretch. The metal door to the loading dock was ahead, safety was just steps away. But when they pushed it open, 2 more masked figures stood blocking the exit. One raised a weapon. Without thinking, Amara grabbed the nearest object, a fire extinguisher, and hurled it. It hit the man squarely in the chest, knocking him back. The second attacker swung at her, but Vaughn tackled him, the 2 crashing into a stack of crates. The king fired once, hitting the first assailant's leg. The man went down screaming. Within moments, it was over. Both attackers were down, the guards from behind catching up and restraining them. But Amara knew this wasn't victory, not yet. Because as the king was escorted to the waiting van, the earpiece man handed Vaughn a slip of paper that had been found on one of the masked attackers. It had 3 names written on it: King Laurent IV, Alexander Vaughn, Amara James, and under her name, in red ink, were 2 words. Not yet. The slip of paper with her name on it felt heavier than any weapon. Not yet. The red letters burned into Amara's mind like a warning, or a promise. She sat in the back of Vaughn's armored van, the king beside her, both surrounded by security. The streets outside were a blur of city lights as they sped away from the hotel, but Amara couldn't shake the feeling that every dark alley hid eyes watching them. Vaughn glanced at her, his tone low but firm. "You're on their list. That means you saw something more than you realize." "I saw a man with a blade," she said, voice trembling. "That's all." "No," King Laurent interrupted, his gaze steady. "You saw the man before the attack. Before anyone else noticed. You noticed the details. Whoever planned this knows you could do it again." Amara shivered. "So what? Now I'm a liability." Vaughn leaned forward. "Now you're under our protection until this is over." No arguments. She wanted to protest, to say she had a family to look after, but the truth was dawning on her. If they could breach a royal suite and an armored security detail, they could find her mother's house in seconds. Staying close to the king and Vaughn might be the only thing keeping her alive. They reached Vaughn's private residence, a modern fortress of steel and glass on the edge of the city. The gates slid shut behind them, the driveway lit with floodlights. Inside, the walls were lined with discreet security cameras and reinforced doors. The security chief gathered everyone in the main hall. "We've confirmed the false server entered through a delivery entrance using credentials provided by someone on staff. The fake emergency that pulled security to the lobby was triggered from an internal phone line. And," he hesitated, "Margaret Blake, floor manager, has disappeared. Her apartment is empty." Amara's chest tightened. She remembered Margaret's sharp voice earlier that day, telling her to leave the suite. She was helping them. More than helping, the chief said grimly. "We traced her bank records, 2 large wire transfers from an unregistered account in San Marquez. Offshore." King Laurent's expression darkened. "That account belongs to my cousin, Prince Dorian." Vaughn's eyes narrowed. "The one you cut out of the oil negotiations?" "Yes," Laurent said quietly. "He stood to lose billions. Apparently, he decided to settle the matter in blood." The room fell silent. The chief broke it. "We believe there's one more attempt coming, likely tonight. They'll move before you change locations again. And they won't stop with the king or Vaughn. Amara is now a confirmed target." Hours passed in tense silence. The house was on lockdown, guards at every entrance. Amara sat in a guest room, staring at the skyline. She kept replaying the day's events, the ajar door, the shoes, the blade. And now this list with her name on it. She dozed off in the chair, but a faint noise woke her, a soft, deliberate click from the window. Her heart jumped. She turned slowly. A figure in black was crouched outside, using a glass cutter on the reinforced pane. She froze for 1 second, then bolted for the door. "They're here," she shouted into the hallway. Alarms blared. Guards rushed past her, but the glass shattered before they could reach the window. The intruder rolled inside, moving fast, a pistol in hand. Amara ducked as the first shot cracked through the air, splintering wood from the doorframe. She scrambled toward the main hall, nearly colliding with Vaughn. "Go," he barked, pushing her toward the safe room. But before they reached it, another gunman appeared from the opposite hall. They were already inside. The king's personal guard opened fire, forcing the attackers back. Vaughn grabbed Amara's arm and pulled her into the kitchen, slamming the door. "They've breached 2 points," Vaughn said into his earpiece. "Seal the north wing. Get the king to the vault." A voice crackled back. "North wing compromised. Static swallowed the rest. The lights cut out. In the pitch black, Amara's pulse thundered in her ears. She heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the kitchen. Vaughn whispered, "Stay behind me." The door burst open. Margaret stepped in. Her hair was tied back, her expression cold, a pistol steady in her hand. "I told them you'd be easy to corner, Vaughn. And you." Her gaze locked on Amara. "You should have stayed invisible, Maid." Amara swallowed hard. "You don't have to do this." "Oh." But I do, Margaret said, smiling without warmth. You cost me a fortune today. And my employer doesn't like loose ends. She raised the pistol, and Amara moved without thinking. She grabbed the heavy cast iron skillet from the counter and swung. The impact knocked the gun from Margaret's hand, clattering across the tiles. Vaughn lunged, tackling Margaret to the ground. The struggle was brief. Trained guards stormed in, hauling her away in handcuffs. Amara leaned against the counter, breathless. By dawn, the siege was over. Several attackers had been captured, others had fled. Prince Dorian's involvement was confirmed through intercepted communications. He was now facing charges in multiple countries. The king found Amara in the courtyard, where she stood watching the sunrise. You saved my life twice in one day, he said quietly. And Vaughn's as well. What can I give you in return? She shook her head. I don't want money, or gifts. I just want to go home. Vaughn joined them, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Home is possible, but with protection. You're not going back to your old life without it. Amara looked between them. Why? The danger's over, isn't it? The king's expression was gentle but honest. For now, but people like Dorian have long memories. You'll be safer if you stay in trusted circles. She hesitated, then sighed. Then I guess my life just changed forever. Weeks later, the Delacroix Palace Hotel reopened under heightened security. Amara never returned to housekeeping. Instead, Vaughn offered her a position as a personal security liaison, a role she never imagined for herself, but one she excelled at. Sometimes, late at night, she thought about the slip of paper. Her name, the red ink, not yet. It was a reminder, not of fear, but of how close she had come to being another ignored voice. And how, by refusing to stay invisible, she had not only saved a king and a billionaire, but rewritten her own story.